in this study. It really means a lot that you would contribute your expertise to this, and we really could not make this a successful study without your input and without your guidance. So again, thank you for all of this. I'm going to go ahead and have a few housekeeping announcements, and then we will go ahead and get into the bulk of the presentation. This meeting is primarily for the task force members for this planning study. However, there are a number of members of the public here on the line with us. I would ask that everyone please hold their comments or their questions until the end of the presentation. We will have a time to address those public comments and those concerns. Secondly, with this being a meeting and this being online, this is a recorded meeting. We will have the video and the transcript available on our public website as soon as we're able to get that up. But just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded and this is in a public forum. And with all of that in mind, I will go ahead and I will do some introductions. In addition to our task force members, we've got Anthony Amos representing Supervisor Harity in the Springfield District. Anthony, I'm not sure. I don't see the supervisor on the call, but if he is available, of course, he is more than welcome to make any opening remarks or statements or anything like that. I wasn't sure if he was on your account or if he has a separate account, but in any case, if you are there with us, Supervisor, thank you, sir.
I will check him out with you. No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
But, and then we also have representing Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. We've got Marcia Pape on the phone. She is the senior land use aide with his office. And so thank you, Marcia, for joining us. And then we have members of our planning commission. We've got the vice chairman, Mr. Timothy Sargent, who is standing in today for Commissioner Pete Murphy, who's not able to be with us. And we also have Commissioner Mary Cortina with us as well. Commissioners Cortina and Murphy are representing the Braddock and the Springfield districts on the task force. And then we also have a number of planning and development staff and county planning staff with us. We've got Graham Owen from the Department of Planning and Development. We've got also with planning and development, we've also got Mike Linsky, who is one of our senior planners. I'm just checking the list here. And then we have also Mr. Tom Burke, who is our transportation planner, who will be assisting us with transportation matters. He's calling in from the Department of Transportation with the county. And then with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share our screen so we can get started on the presentation. I should also mention that with this being an online meeting, if anyone has any questions or comments or things that they don't necessarily want to share as a vocally or on video, they're more than welcome to put any questions or comments in the chat, and we will answer them at the end of the meeting. And with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started here on the presentation. And so again, this is the Fairfax Center area study, the phase 3 core area. This is the first meeting of our community task force, and the date today is April 2nd, 2024. Just by way of an agenda this evening, we've already gone through some introductions and housekeeping. The presentation this evening will focus on the study background and some of what led up to the genesis of this study, some of the scope and responsibilities of the task force, and then we'll talk about how this study aligns with concurrent studies as far as its schedule and next steps going forward. And then at the end, we'll shift gears a little bit and getting away from some of the more introductory items. And we'll talk about some of the existing conditions and some of the analysis that we've done to date within the core area here. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for questions and comments. And I should mention here that we'll break periodically if there are any questions or comments from the task force. Of course, we don't want to leave all of that toward the end. So our task force membership this evening, I've already given a number of introductions. We have Commissioners Cortina and Murphy as the planning district representatives. We've got Vice Chairman Sargent standing in this evening. And also those volunteers that are with us this evening, we've got Mr. Kerry Adams representing the Braddock district. Mr. Sam Gray is not able to be with us with the Springfield district tonight, but we'll get him caught up just as soon as he's available. We've got Sabrina Motton with the Braddock district as well, and also Jimmy Shaughnessy with the Springfield district. And you can see what we've done here with the membership is really aligned this to be representative across both the Braddock and the Springfield districts, because we have representation of the core area in both those supervisory districts. So where are we exactly in the county? This is the Fairfax Center area, and it's located in the middle portion of the county, just to the west of the city of Fairfax. You can kind of see that built-up area there along the right-hand side of your screen. And the way that the Fairfax Center area has been planned and laid out is we have a core area, which is distinguished by such features as the Fairfax County Government Center, the Fair Oaks Mall. We've got a number of retail establishments, and then we've got residential establishments as well. All of that is being bisected by Route 66. And as we move away from the core area, we have areas that are planned and developed for less intense development around the suburban center, the non-core area, and then the suburban neighborhoods, which are a little bit farther afield when you start getting into, once you move westward towards Centerville, you'll start to see that build up again. But the periphery of the Fairfax Center area is primarily lower density suburban neighborhoods. As far as the timeline, of course, this is now phase 3. There were 2 prior phases to this. The first one was in 2013, where the guidance for those low density residential areas on the periphery were first established. In phase 2, starting in 2016, this is when staff and planning commission and a phase 2 task force really started looking at the overall vision for the Fairfax Center area. And that's when we started to look at the overall vision, the guidance, and what shape of development the suburban center should take in the coming years. There were a number of recommendations that came out of the phase 2 study that the task force recommended for some follow-on actions. However, at the time, this needed a transportation analysis to really be able to analyze the core area in any greater detail. And so with that in mind, phase 3 officially is starting in 2023. We're now at a phase where we can kick off the task force here. But now that transportation study has been funded and is underway, where it allows us to continue on with the phase 3. And you'll see here that we've got a timeline of about at this point, about 15 months or so. It's going to include that transportation study. Our task force is going to help us look at the core area land uses and intensities within that pink area there on the map. And then a big portion of this land area is subject to the government center visioning project. And I'll talk about that in some detail because that's going to really play a key role here in the overall development of the core area. So some of the key features within the core area I mentioned, just so that everyone's oriented. I mentioned the government center, which you can see there with the large crescent-shaped building there in the lower left-hand corner. I'm sorry, the lower right-hand corner. We've got Fairfax Corner to the north, just on the other side of Monument Drive. On the other side of 66, we have Fair Oaks Mall, the Center Point, commercial and residential developments. Fairfax Town Center and Fairfax Promenade are both retail establishment areas. And then we've got a number of residential neighborhoods interspersed throughout the core area as well. One of which is on the eastern boundary of the core area, the reserve at Fairfax Corner. And I'll talk about that in some detail here soon. That's been included in this study as part of a proposal to potentially modify the intensity allowed at that site to allow for some additional residential development. So moving forward, the authorization from the Board of Supervisors for Phase 3, of course, this I mentioned is a follow-on motion from the Phase 2 study, but it's really to revise the guidance for land units A and B. That's the core area that I mentioned. It's to conduct that transportation analysis that's needed to further that core analysis, but then also to do any editorial updates for the entire Fairfax Center area plan text. Just given the amount of time that's elapsed, there have been some new plans and some new existing development gone into place, and so there could be some opportunities to bring the plan text to match the current development situation. And as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the reserve at Fairfax Corner. Well, not technically in the core area. It's been included here because the development pattern is so similar. So I just mentioned something here on the last slide here about mixed-use development intensity, and there's a measurement on that prior slide about FAR, which is floor to area ratio. Now we're going to be using this particular metric quite a bit as we discuss the development of the core area. But essentially, floor to area ratio is a way to evaluate and describe the use or the intensity of development on a property, often used in mixed use. So when you think about this, it's essentially a ratio between the total amount of building floor space on a property to the total land area of that property. So for example, a 1.0 FAR is considered like a 100% lot covered with a one-story building. Or you could have that same intensity of development at 50% of the lot covered in 2 stories, or 25% of the lot covered in 4 stories. And so you have more opportunities to have open space on a site when you build up, but you're not sacrificing any of the development intensity in doing so. And so this can be applied in any number of ways, but you'll see here that as we start talking about the amount of development, you'll see FAR playing a key role here in how we describe that. Another way of thinking of this is looking at some examples for what constitutes different levels of FAR. And so when you look at a 0.25 FAR, for example, we might consider this to be a low intensity kind of a strip mall commercial type development where the majority of the site is open space, or it's parking lot, or something along those lines. Generally, the buildings are 1 or 2 stories, and we generally consider this to be a low intensity development pattern. Moving up the scale here, we started getting into medium intensity, about a 1.0 to about a 1.3. You can see these are sort of our mixed use centers where we've got a mixture of residential or commercial or other types of properties or uses on a property. Sometimes we include structured parking depending on how densely that property is developed. But when we think about like a 1.0 to about a 1.3, we're really thinking about our mixed use centers, such as Fairfax Corner here in the core area development. And then looking at the high intensity, we look at transit oriented development. These are our great our great scale developments within the county, such as Tyson's or some parts of Reston, where you really have transit-oriented development focused around the availability of metro or other transit opportunity. Now, the key part of phase 3 here in determining the level of development for the core area is really going to be finding that sweet spot between, not going all the way to a transit-oriented development because we don't yet have a metro station here on site, but providing enough development to be able to incentivize the growth of that transit area and the overall, realization of the suburban centers plan as it's laid out in the comprehensive plan. And so we're looking at perhaps somewhere anywhere from about maybe a 1.0, 1.3, perhaps in some areas a 2.0. I don't want to necessarily put a limit on that, but much of that's going to depend on transportation and what the existing infrastructure is able to support in the area. And that's going to be a key question here for our task force members. So moving forward, when we look at the comprehensive plan, each of our development centers within the county has a segment called the Concept for Future Development. And here in the Fairfax Center Suburban Center, it's really envisioned as a place where people are able to live, work, and play. And the greatest intensity is focused around a planned transit station in the median of I-66 near the Fair Oaks Mall. And of course, this ultimately is planning for an extension of Metro Rail's Orange Line to the area. But we recognize that this could be some years out. It could be 30 to 40 years away still. But now is the opportunity for us to be able to develop this as an area where we can facilitate that future growth and that extension and really lay the groundwork. So once that metro station comes, the economic development is fully able to take that into an account. So shifting gears here, just a bit about the task force's scope and responsibilities with respect to the study. I did mention that the membership is made up of members from the Springfield and the Braddock districts. This is because the core area is divided among those 2 districts. We see the government center and kind of points somewhat to the southwest in the Braddock district, and the remainder of the core area, such as the Fair Oaks Mall over in Springfield. And so having this diversity of different membership here is really enabling us to develop and plan the core area as a whole. And so part of the task here is going to be to look at certain recommendations for the core area, with a primary eye on looking at the types of land use, the mix and intensity, and what might be appropriate for the core area. And so you'll see here in the plan as we go forward, having an opportunity to really refine the vision for the core area, and then evaluate some development scenarios, and ultimately land on one that would be in the best service here of the core area. So with the task force kicking off now in April, we would envision this to be about a 12 to a 15-month process. This schedule has been carefully considered so that it aligns with some other concurrent planning studies we have going on. We've got a number of different dependencies and a number of different different studies that are going to be informing the core area study here, and so I'll talk about that. But we anticipate that the task force is going to be meeting about quarterly to conduct its business, and it really is important that we keep the business of the task force within the scope of these meetings in order for us to be able to ensure that the process is transparent, and that we're all working off of the same set of information, and that the public is kept aware of all of the different deliberations and so forth. But you'll see that some of these meetings may include, we have today the introduction, overview, and roles and responsibilities. We'll be getting into some of the existing conditions in this meeting, but it may be necessary for us to have some subsequent meetings on the existing conditions in greater detail. We'll be talking about the vision for the core area, and then as development scenarios are developed, we'll start to discuss the types of scenarios that might be appropriate, and the impacts that those may have on the surrounding community, and then how to mitigate those, and then ultimately refine and come up with a recommendation that we would put forward for amending the comprehensive plan. So I mentioned a number of concurrent planning efforts. Here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see in this bubble the Phase 3 study consists of our transportation study that I mentioned earlier. We've got a number of site-specific plan amendments, one of which is the reserve at Fairfax Corner. And then we've got another project here that's going to really kind of drive a lot of the development pattern within the core area, and that's the government center visioning project. I'm going to talk about that a little bit right here, but in addition to this, and things we ought to be considering outside the kind of the bubble of Phase 3, but nonetheless important, we've got the Route 29 transportation study. Route 29 is just to the south of the core area. And then we've got some other planning efforts and site-specific plan amendments. Within the area, we've got the ongoing Fair Lake study. We've got the ongoing Centerville area study, for example. And so not directly relevant to Phase 3, but we'll want to make sure that we keep the task force and decision makers involved in the development of those studies as well. So just a brief update on where we are on the transportation studies. We've got the Phase 3 transportation study that really kicked off last year. The Department of Transportation has retained a consultant, Farron Piers, to conduct the study. And so far, they've conducted a baseline analysis of the core area. This is now complete. However, they are now waiting on inputs from staff and the task force as far as what level of development might be appropriate. And so as we start to develop that development scenario, we'll be able to better inform that transportation analysis. It could very well be that we start off with a maximum for testing purposes, but then we start to scale that back when we actually start looking at what the development may actually look like once it would be implemented. And so that's going to be something that we're going to be keeping up with very closely, and of course the planning land use side of things ties very closely to the transportation study. The second is the Route 29 study, and FCDOT's consultant on this one is Jacobs. They've completed their baseline here as well, and they are working currently on some mitigation and plan recommendations for the Route 29 corridor, roughly between and the staff online can correct me later, but it's roughly between the area of I want to say it's West Ox Road and approximately Germantown Road along the 29 corridor. But you can see the corridor there along the southern border of this map here. This is one of the maps that came out of the Phase 3 study showing pedestrian level of comfort. And so it's an analysis of the different pedestrian routes within the area and where there are some gaps and where there are some areas for improvement, as well as places where pedestrian walking and biking and so forth are either very comfortable or comfortable in the area. And so as we start looking at some multimodal and non-vehicle based solutions for the core area, these types of analyses will be very important to us. I mentioned this site-specific plan amendment, the reserve at Fairfax Corner. Site-specific plan amendments are a way for any member of the public to come forward and put forward a nomination for a comprehensive plan amendment. Not like an area-wide study, such as looking at the entire suburban center or the whole core area. These site-specific plan amendments typically focus on one parcel or just a small number of consolidated parcels, and so they're very localized and they're very specific with the recommendations that they provide in the comprehensive plan. This particular nomination site you can see here is just to the northeast of the Fairfax County Government Center. It's just outside our core area, but the reserve is about 45 acres. Currently has about 650 multifamily residential apartment units. The current adopted plan, as it's been, the policy plan, the area-wide guidance for this site says that the density should be about 8 to 12 dwelling units per acre. The nominator in this case, EQR Fairfax Corner LLC, is seeking a slight increase from about a 0.35 FAR mixed use in connection with Fairfax Corners. It's currently planned up to about a 0.42 FAR. The idea here would that this would be creating a new multifamily building, about 405 units. To do this, they would need to replace, I believe it's 2 existing buildings, and then it would be a net increase of about 335 units. And so as this this core area study moves forward, we're going to be following the analysis here at the reserve for one of those potential development scenarios within the core area and analyzing the impacts and really determining whether or not this this nomination is a suitable level of intensity given the impacts that it may create on the community. And so that's going to be one of our development scenarios. The next larger development scenario is going to be the government center visioning process. And this is really concerning itself with the government center campus here on the southwestern, kind of southeastern portion of the core area. You can kind of see here the overlay. It includes not only the government center itself, but also the Harity and Pinino buildings and the public safety headquarters, as well as the affordable housing development, the residences at Government Center there to the northeast. So just a little bit of context and background on why are we revisioning the Government Center is that back in February of 2023, an affordable housing developer came forward and there was a plan amendment and a rezoning to entitle about this area parking lots G&H of the Government Center for about 279 units of affordable housing. The residents at the Government Center is about 275 units. It's now a few years old, but it was seen as being a real success story in terms of being able to provide affordable housing to the community. And so to replicate that success, the developer has proposed 279 units, would be two 5-story buildings to include 15,000 square foot of either daycare or community space. Now, it's this directly aligns with the county's policies and its strategic direction for looking at how can we better provide for affordable housing. And to this end, the target population for this development is about a 70% area median income. So it's essentially serving those that make at or below 70% of what the median income is for the area. But ultimately, given that our public lands are in short supply, and there's a lot of demand on how those lands might be used, this really prompted a discussion among the Board of Supervisors and others about how can we better position the county government to look at how the lands of the government center are used. This really prompted a discussion of kind of what is the county's strategic priority, what has changed since the government center was initially developed back in the 1980s, and how can the county really position the government center campus to really take advantage of many of the things that it now needs to do in the modern era for providing services for the county and its residents. So we have several goals here with the government center visioning process. The first of which is to consider the capacity for repurposing a lot of the surface parking lots currently on site, and perhaps creating some additional public or institutional and community serving uses on those areas of parking that are no longer needed. The idea would be replacing the surface parking with more of a structured parking and more of a bringing in the government center campus into that mixed use character within the core area that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned, the need to kind of update the way in which we're looking at how the government center is serving its residences. Since the government center campus has been developed, we have a brand new comprehensive plan for the area. We've got a new strategic plan, the very first the county has since adopted. And we've got other strategic priorities such as One Fairfax and equity, and the need to really look at how these policies are influencing and directing how we use the government center campus going forward over the next, say, 20 years or so. And then in terms of the way that this particular project is managed, the county has retained a consultant to help us with this process. It's a planning and architecture firm by the name of Tordy Gallus, and they've had a lot of experience with doing these types of planning exercises for county government centers around the country. And so we're really looking forward to working with them. And then this whole effort is being guided by a committee of county leadership at the the director and the executive levels within county government as kind of a steering committee. And then we'll have opportunities for the community to provide input and guidance in this process as well. And so, it's not just what the government wants to see happen for its government center, but it's also how it can better serve the community and really what the community wants to see out of its kind of flagship property within the county. But as I mentioned earlier, this is, the way in which we're considering this whole kind of sub-project is that it's going to be considered as one of the development scenarios for the task force to help us evaluate in phase 3. So just looking at this another way, I know that last slide had a lot of words on it, but some of the major priorities that we're looking at with the government center visioning the campus is, I mentioned how do we bring this campus, which is currently quite isolated, how do we bring this into more of the development pattern that is planned for the rest of the core area? How do we promote things like connectivity between not only within the campus itself, but also within the wider community? How do we take advantage of the transit opportunities that are available, and then provide for a safe and comfortable walking and biking experience in the area? Of course, we want to consider that now that the affordable housing has been approved, we want to consider the impact of that within the context of the campus itself. We want to assess the need for the surface parking and how and to what extent that can be repurposed for other uses. We want to protect our natural resources. The government center campus is one of those really neat areas within the core area that really provides a lot of the green and open space that really make a community, what it is. It becomes kind of a de facto place for respite and recreation, and a place where someone can escape the busyness of daily life and perhaps go for a walk in the woods or playing on the ellipse, in a game of frisbee, or attending an outdoor concert. And so there's a lot of the site here that's really used for those purposes, and we want to retain that, certainly as much as possible. So the real focus is on the surface parking lots and how those can be repurposed. But the whole idea here is that it's enhancing the service delivery both for the local community and also for those residents throughout the county that rely on the government center for their business. So in looking at the schedule from our consultant, Torty Gallus, you can kind of see here, now this is a busy slide, but I will walk you through it here. This schedule started off in January of 2024, that's this year, and we're projecting going through for about 12 to 13 months or so. We've already had a consultant and county leadership kickoff meetings. These were internal meetings to get the project up on its feet, and the consultant has just completed for us a baselining and existing conditions analysis for the government center property, and it also includes much of the core area as well, given that it immediately surrounds this area. So we're right now in the process of finalizing that report with the consultant, and we'll make that available as soon as we're able to. But moving forward, you can kind of see here, the first step is really starting that stakeholder outreach early and often. And so to that end, in April and May, we'll be targeting some stakeholders for outreach, having some small focus groups. And this will ultimately lead up to a broader community meeting or a set of community meetings in May. This may be a community meeting, much like what we're having here now, but really we'd like to see something that would be, more in person, something that may be more of an open house, and something where we're really able to solicit feedback from the community. What is it that they want to see out of their government center going forward? And so really that's going to be informing the development of visions and goals for the government center. And then once we have the vision and goals in place, and we've really kind of established those parameters, that's when our consultant is going to start to help us develop the development scenarios for the government center campus. And this is going to be, kind of an ongoing kind of a process between the Phase 3 task force and the government center visioning consultant, in that this feeds into the evaluating those different development scenarios for Phase 3 as a whole. And then ultimately these would be provided for once we have a set of development scenarios based on everything that we've learned to date. We would get some more community feedback on those and ultimately refine that development scenario down into a single kind of more unified unified plan for the government center. And then we will, after developing and refining this, we would have some presentations to county leadership and community meetings there at the end, just as kind of not only a way to introduce the plan to the community, but just to make sure that we've heard and we've understood what it is that the community wants and that it's accurately reflected in the plan going forward. So again, that's about a 12-13 month process in working with our consultant. But then we also wanted to make sure that what the consultant is doing is going to align with our wider effort here in Phase 3. And so what this is essentially going to look like, it follows the same general approach here. From about starting in beginning of this year all the way into early 2025. We've already started looking at the existing conditions analysis for the core area. Today, here in April, we have our task force kickoff, and very shortly we're going to be doing that targeted stakeholder outreach and focus groups. A lot of that is going to overlap with what's happening with government center visioning, and so as we finalize that stakeholder plan, we will be working on both government center visioning and the Phase 3 outreach. This is, of course, all part of kind of making sure that we understand that the vision for the core area and the goals for the core area and any planning assumptions that we might make are correct. And so, we want to start off with a kind of a common understanding of the core area and kind of where we would like to see it develop in terms of broad kind of area-wide policy. You can see here we've got a series of kind of quarterly task force meetings, and so this is where the task force will be involved in each of these steps. But after we've done the visioning for the core area, we start to develop those development scenarios, and we'll be evaluating that in concert with not only government center visioning, but with the task force and with gaining community input along the way. We'll refine those core area development scenarios down into more of a unified plan for the core area. In line with the task force, and then we'll refine that into a series of community-informed recommendations to ultimately update the comprehensive plan. And so you can kind of see here how this aligns with the overall, finishing up of the government center visioning and using all of the planning processes that came before to really, finalize and refine those recommendations. Of course, with any plan amendment, and it being a public process, it's not only the community meetings that are key to the process, but also the public hearings with the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors at the end of the process that ultimately would result in adoption by the Board of Supervisors and a new updated comprehensive plan for the core area. And so, of course, this is all subject to change, but we estimate that this is going to take us through the beginning of 2025 for the entire process. Now, at this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I've talked an awful lot. I want to just make sure that I'm giving the members of the task force an opportunity to ask any questions before we move on to the next portion of the meeting. I want to make sure that if there are any questions, we can go ahead and answer them at this time. It appears as though we had a bit of a background noise or some feedback there. I went ahead and I muted all the lines, but if you would like to talk, please unmute yourselves, and we would be happy to do some questions here. I see Commissioner Cortina has a question, has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understand. You'll have the dates for all the community meetings, et cetera, will be posted somewhere. So
yes,
and we'll be invited to whatever might be out there. And if we're not able to go, or if we're not invited or whatever, all that feedback comes to the task force. So we will be able, I just want to make sure that the community members, whether they're businesses or residents, that they have an opportunity to be heard in this process, and that we can all see what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have, one of the fortunate things that we have here, at least on the county side, is that we have the same team of planners and professionals working on both projects. We've got government center visioning, we've got the phase 3 effort, and so it dovetails very nicely. And so, it's very easy for us to be able to take information from one of those planning efforts and easily share it with the others and make that publicly available in the same way that we would any other project. And so even though we might have maybe a community meeting that would be targeted more for the government center, we'll want to make sure to make that information available to the public, not only for those interested in the government center, but in the wider phase 3 as well. And so,
you'll have a website or something as well.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a slide here at the end that I believe share with the website and all that. If you for those looking to do this more immediately, the best way is to just Google Fairfax Center area phase 3, and the website pops right up in Google. But we have that link as well, and so that's kind of the key place where all of the most current information can be found, and that's kind of one of our many ways that we're keeping the public up to date. Oh, thank you, Graham. You just put that URL there in the chat for anyone just to click, so I appreciate that. But yeah, if there's ever any question about what's the most current information on the project, the website is the best place to look. If it's something that we're still in the process of developing, and there could be some things that we may first share with the task force and then post for the community. But that's kind of a transient type of thing where there's not going to be anything that we share here with the task force that we wouldn't otherwise share with the community.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Do any other task force members have any questions? I know I've bombarded you with a lot of information. I think the next part of the meeting is I'd like for us to kind of have a conversation about the existing conditions within the core area and kind of walk through that existing conditions study that that we put forward, that's available publicly on our website. So if there's any questions there. I think.
Hey, Ryan, this is Mike Linsky. There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
If you want to look there.
Thank you. So let's see. We've got one question here from James R. James asks, how would a green space like a park or a trail like that around the government center factor into the FAR? Well, really, it doesn't necessarily factor into the FAR directly. However, typically, when you look at the guidance under our policy plan, using parks as an example, if you have a certain level of development, for example, you're creating a residential development that's going to generate a new number of residences for the county, there's the expectation under our policies that there'd be a certain amount of park space, required to be put on site or something like that to be able to serve those new residences. And then for trails, of course, with any mixed use development, whether that's here or anywhere else in the county, we're looking at things like connectivity and how are people able to transit the area and connect to the wider area as a whole. And so when you look at FAR in terms of you can have like a 1.0 FAR, which is I'm using 1.0 as kind of an example of what Fairfax Corner is, here, is that you can have that FAR, but you don't necessarily need to sacrifice your FAR in order to provide that open space and that availability for open space on the property itself. And so you can look at different development options, such as perhaps building up or building in a way that can accommodate both the desired development intensity and the open space as well. But that's a great question. I see that Ann Shin has a question here in the chat. The natural area with trees around the government center currently looks rather sparse. I recognize there's going to be a construction project going on as well as a stream restoration. Will the trees in the area be restored to its former state? Yes, you're correct. You're correct there in that there is a current project to restore the stream channel there as part of a broader restoration of the watershed. And unfortunately, when they do these types of projects, it does require some trees to come down in order to accommodate the construction. But part of that construction plan is a replanting plan, and so those trees will ultimately be able to grow up, and it looks rather unsightly right now. But in a few years, we'll start to see that canopy develop again. But typically, you'll without getting into the details, you'll see that there's a replanting plan as part of that construction plan, where if it's not a 1-for-1 replacement, it's close to that in order to accommodate the design of the stream channel. And then let's see. Great. For those following along in the chat here, Graham has posted a link to the story map for that stream restoration project, and so that should provide some additional details.
Another one, Ryan, is Michael Lieberman asked what defines comfort level of a pedestrian trail. Tom Burke with DOT might be able to best answer that question. Tom, you wanna take that one?
Sure. We're using a metric called pedestrian level of comfort these days, and it's not. It's more dealing with making sure that pedestrians feel comfortable in the pedestrian facility. So to get more comfortable results or a better level of comfort, you need wider pathways, you need wider buffers. Don't have the pathway right on the roadway curb so cars are right next to you. Push it out as far as you can, understanding that in some places you might be able to do that easier than others. Street trees are also a factor. So basically, pedestrian level of comfort is trying to develop recommendations within reason, context sensitive, that can make pedestrians actually feel comfortable walking and not stress out while they're walking, immediately adjacent to the road.
Great, thank you, Tom. We've got another question here in the chat from Glenn. How much money are we spending on the various studies and consultants you have mentioned? I cannot speak for the Department of Transportation and their consultants, but the Government Center Visioning effort, I believe, and don't hold this to me because I can look up the number here, but I believe the budget that we have allocated for that, I believe, is $195,000 for that. I'm just looking here. I will look that up and I can get you the exact number, but that's, in terms of a planning study, that's fairly typical for given the scope of work and what we're asking the consultant to do in this case. Given this is a longer term study, it's fairly complicated. The scope of work that we're asking of them, but I believe that's the figure there. I'm not sure, Tom, if you have the numbers for transportation off the top of your head, but
yeah, this study, and there's a lot of complexities, models, and data, etc. We used a little bit more than DPD did. Ours was 250,000.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions here in the chat. Just before we delve into some of the existing conditions, are there any other questions from the task force members? And if not, we can go ahead and move forward here. I am going to share my screen once again, and this time I'm going to be pulling up the document on the existing conditions for the Fairfax Center area. For those of you who are following along, just one moment, please. I'm having some technical difficulties and it's slowing down my computer. But for those of you who may not want to follow along on the screen, this is a document that's available on the project website as well. The link there is in the chat that Graham had just shared, and here he goes. He's a step ahead of me. Already shared a link there in the chat, and so we have that available to us. Just one moment, and I'll see if I can. My Teams is hanging up as soon as I'm trying to share my screen. So just please just one moment, and I will be right with you. Okay, so right now I am sharing the PDF document. You should all be able to see this. If not, please let me know and I will see what I can do there. But this is a document that we prepared initially back in phase 1 back in 2013. We had an existing conditions that was conducted for the entirety of the suburban center, and so it looked at things from kind of the change in demographics over the years to various functional areas such as land use, transportation, environment, kind of public services, and it very closely mirrored the same functional areas that the policies of our comprehensive plan are organized under. You can see here, we have a kind of just an introduction of the study, kind of the background that I mentioned in the presentation, followed by some information here. You've got the project website, the planning and development website for all of our different studies, that this phased approach that I mentioned earlier, and kind of just some generalized planning information about the Fairfax Center area. You'll recognize this map here from our presentation. This is kind of the comprehensive plan's concept of future development for the area, showing that high intensity core area, and then it tapers off into less intense uses farther out. Here's a map of the core area, and then here we've got kind of some pages on. If I can kind of, I'm going to shrink this just a little bit so everybody can see it. But then we've got just a sense here of the character, the residential character of the core area. everything from the Center Point developments, the park at Fair Oaks. We've got Camden, Fairfax Corner. All of these are multifamily residential communities within the core area. We've got Halstead, Fair Oaks Landing, Camden Monument Place. Just not to give a full inventory of all of the houses available, but we did want to provide kind of a snapshot in time of the residential character of the core area as it is today. The existing condition. All of this is, of course, supplemented by some of the non-residential developments within the core area. And if you think back to that slide I had describing the different scopes of the FAR, you can kind of see how we've got a real mix here in the core area. We've got some areas that, like Fairfax Corner, just north of the government center, that's kind of a more of a mixed use environment where you've got some lower intensity commercial combined with some residential properties. The government center is, of course, rather isolated. It's kind of the odd property out when it comes to development within the core area, of course, just given its unique character. But then you've also got the Fair Oaks Mall, which some of you may have been involved in that planning study several years ago. The Fair Oaks Mall itself has actually been replanned independently of the core area. And so one of the recommendations that came out of the phase 2 effort was really to take a look at some of those properties that are ancillary to the mall around that mall ring road, and how all of this kind of fits into the core area as a whole. You can see some of the other non-residential properties are like Fair Lakes Promenade, which is this is the shopping center where we have, for example, there's the Nordstrom Rack over there. There's the Barnes & Noble bookstore, the Old Navy, things like this. These are kind of the larger anchor stores, and I believe there's one more that I'm not recalling. But so that's one type of character. We've got the Fairfax Town Center, which is another, which is similar in character to that. But really, it's the core area. You can kind of tell, like, as of today, it's sort of an area that's in transition. We've got a lot of different types of uses and different intensities. Ultimately, with that underlying guidance for kind of what does a core area look like for mixed use. Kind of to put this in a kind of a plan context. In the way in which the comprehensive plan looks at this is that the core area is divided up into what we call different land units, and then within each of these land units there's specific recommendations. And so for example, the land unit A1 is the mall property. It's been planned for mixed use up to a 1.0 FAR. Similarly, you look at a place like down in B1, which is Fairfax Corner, that's office mixed use up to about a 0.35, with options for up to a 1.0 FAR in terms of overall development. So you can kind of think of right now, Fairfax Corner and the mall property are kind of, in many ways, kind of planned kind of the same intensity, same types of uses. And then you see some of our other properties here. We've got some commercial mixed properties. We've got office mixed use. We've got, B2, which is the government center. That's currently planned for office mixed use at 0.35. And so just kind of give an inventory of the types of land uses currently planned for the core area. You can see it is a mix, and it is also a mix of different intensities as well. And then we get into the demographics of the area. As a planner, I really enjoy looking at demographics. I enjoy looking at the kind of how it is that we define the population that we're trying to serve here in the core area. And I think one of the starkest differences in this core area with other areas of the county is that we've got, of course, we've got our standard, like our age and our population distribution, and how many people have 2 or more households. We've got certain racial compositions, which we do look at. We look at the kind of the diversity of the area, language spoken at home. All of this is incredibly helpful when we start doing community outreach and we start looking at how is the best way to meet people, where they are. And certainly language spoken at home is a key way that people are able to interact with local government, and so that's very important to us. But then we also look at things like travel habits, how people are, the travel time that they commute to and from work, how they're getting to work, whether that's car or bike or walking or other means, and then also things like vehicles per household. Now, I will say that this data is more representative of pre-COVID and pre-isolation and pre-work from home. And so, this, unfortunately, although it is the most current data we have, it is somewhat dated given the current work situation. But, it's kind of one of those things that remains to be seen, how things are going to normalize, now that COVID has passed us and we're starting to return to more of some of us are returning to the office. Some companies have chosen a remote model. And so, all of this is still very much in flux, as you know.
Hey, Ryan,
yes.
Could you zoom in just a little bit on this? It's kind of hard
I
to read.
apologize. Yeah. On my screen, it's cutting off, but I just want to make sure that everyone can see this. So let me see here. Is that any better at all? Okay.
Yeah.
And then you can see here, this is kind of interesting as well. You've got, especially when you start looking at things like housing affordability and things like that, you're looking at, the income of a given area. We really see a wide range of income levels, both, inside the core area and outside the core area. When we combine that, when we compare that to, our historical data, looking at the county as a whole and within the suburban center. But the general trend here is that the core area has become more affluent in the last decade since we first started looking at the study. The increase in those making over 100,000 per year, and the percentage of those making under 100,000 are showing decreases. And so you kind of see this upward shift of salaries within the core area, which, not trying to draw any conclusions as to why that might be, but it is important just to note, where we are in relation to the rest of the county. Then, of course, looking at employment, you've got kind of a really interesting mix here of different employers, and you can see these types of reports are broken down by essentially by industry. And you can see here we've got kind of the bottom there, the largest group of people are in the either professional, scientific, and management services or educational services, healthcare, social assistance, things like that. With the government center being here in the core area, you see kind of a representation of those in public administration. And so, this might be a little bit higher, and you can see that it is between like outside the core, inside the core, and Fairfax County as a whole. It's in some ways, in looking at this, it's about the same as it is in the core area. But again, you have to look at the other demographics as a whole. It could be a lot of people are commuting to get to the government center versus working locally. And then I'm not going to dwell on too much demographics here because I do want to get to the other sections. But you can see here, as is kind of trending in line with Fairfax County as a whole. You have quite a high number of population within the core area having attained at least a bachelor's degree. You'll see the core area has a slightly higher educational attainment than the rest of the county. It's, you got 68.9 in the county, you got 63.6 outside of the core. I'm sorry, strike that. 68.9 within the core area, 63.6 outside the core area. And so you see the core area population, as a whole tends to generally be perhaps maybe a little more educated than the county as a whole. And then here's perhaps one of the most striking demographics is when we get into housing, is that if we look here at this top graph, this is a striking difference here. Within the core area, we have a much higher percentage of renters than we do outside the core area. This is due in large part to the large number of multifamily residences within the core area, given that it is a higher density than some other areas. We do see that there's a higher number of multifamily homes, but also we see that that's not only a function of the housing stock, but then if you look at overall within the county, there's fewer people here that are owning their homes. And so kind of what that means for the study here is it starts to affect looking at the types of units that are available here in the core area, what's currently available versus what's planned versus what should be available here. That all speaks to the character of the area. And you can see here kind of a sense, this particular map shows the core area, and the colors, if I can zoom in here a little bit, the colors are representative of the types of different land uses. And so, you've got a lot of the commercial properties here in green. You've got orange representing your multifamily units I spoke about. Not really too much in the way of townhome or single family residential within the core area, but then immediately outside is where you really have a high number of single family residential homes. That's either townhomes or single family homes. You'll see here to the south, we've got a number of townhome units. We've got kind of farther out, we've got the single family neighborhoods. And you see that this is reflective of how the suburban center has been planned as a whole. And then, of course, we've got some population forecasts. One thing to pay attention to is when we look at the demographics of the core area, this is all broken down by the census tract. And so the census tract does not directly correlate to the boundaries of the core area. And so it takes a little bit of interpretation here with the data, but it gives us a sense of the types of the types of population growth that we're looking at. So, in this particular case, you see it says the core area is projected to grow by approximately 20% by 2050. But that's that modeling is including both the number of persons as well as the housing units that have been projected and also planned for in terms of what we've already considered in the comprehensive plan. Going forward a little bit here, our next kind of functional area is roads and transportation. And you can see here we've got a kind of an inventory of all of the different types of ways in which people get around. This particular map comes out of our transportation plan map. This is a part of our comprehensive plan that essentially looks at the future planning of the transportation system. And so here in the core area where this star is, that's where the government center is, you can see this open area is the kind of government center campus. To the north, we've got this planned metro rail station along the I-66 corridor. That's kind of one of the main drivers for the phase 3 study. We've got perhaps some planned connection roads and things like this down here that are on the plan. Of course, have not yet been constructed or anything like that. And then we've got a number of circles here on the map, and these are our planned interchanges along the kind of Route 66 here, and then along Route 29 as well. And so these are things that the Route 29 study is going to be looking carefully at is, are there opportunities to perhaps remove or modify these intersections to better accommodate the more multimodal, more pedestrian-friendly type of environment that is currently planned for the Fairfax Center area and the core area as a whole. And so all of these are things that are being factored into in terms of the transportation analysis. See here, you're familiar with this pedestrian level of comfort map. Same thing, I've included it here with a little bit of a text background. But you can see here, of course, kind of one of the main notable features is that trail network at the government center that we talked about. Something we haven't really talked about yet is biking, but certainly we are looking at that as part of the transportation analysis and indeed part of the recommendations for overall connectivity of the core area. You can see here, this is the bicycle network, and you can see it's kind of color coded by not only the bike routes being most comfortable to use caution, but also the types of trails that are available in the area, whether those are primary, secondary, natural surface or other like sidewalk type of trails. And so that's a representation of the bicycle network map as it currently stands today. But of course, all of this is open to certain modifications when we start looking at the results of the transportation study and how we can increase connectivity for the area. Looking here at the transit network, very similar. This is primarily at this time, without Metro being here, we're mostly looking at the bus network. overall, you can see the core area is very well served by the Fairfax connector. There's a number of stops. There's a number of different destinations throughout the region that a user is able to get to from the core area. Some of the, I guess, more notable things here that I see is that there's some improvements that could be made in terms of connecting, like for example, Fairfax Corner into the network there. We see that there's not really something that's going through there, and so that might require a little bit of a walking distance. But overall, you see it's fairly well connected. The next section we have here is environment, and I know that just given from what I've seen in the chat so far about the trails and the open space, this is something that is on everyone's mind. Our environment section of our comprehensive plan deals with a lot of different environmental issues, everything from our resource protection areas and our environmental quality corridors that are typically around our stream valleys and our floodplains. Then the water quality and quantity control measures. These are our things such as watershed protection, stormwater protection, things of this nature. We have noise, which is when we think of noise, we typically think of uses that generate noise, but this is more so road noise, and it's the idea here being is that it is unhealthy to be exposed to high levels of road noise, and so it's our policy that we would limit exposure to those areas, or we would be able to mitigate beyond a certain limit so that that noise impact is minimized. We follow our green building policies within the county. See, we have a number of recommendations in the comp plan for seeking a formal certification process on green building, whether that's for example, a LEED rating or an equivalent green building scheme. The idea here is that all of our public facilities would be planned to that level of green building, but then we would recommend those same requirements or the same level of guidance for private buildings as well. We mentioned our tree cover and our landscaping as part of that question on the stream restoration, and so of course that's kind of one of our key policy areas of how we are protecting that tree cover and protecting those environmental services that they provide. And then this segment here on capital projects there speaks to that stream restoration that I spoke about, and that's considered a county capital project that has been accounted for and budgeted for in our overall county capital improvements program, is how that is all funded and managed. So looking here, this is a map showing the core area and the environmentally sensitive areas. You can see primarily it's the stream valley around the government center. You can see where we've got the resource protection areas around the stream there. We've got a few steep slopes and things like that, but primarily it's confined to the government center and the area immediately around that. Let's talk about public facilities a little bit. This is always a key thing when we start looking at the development in an area. We always want to see, what impact is that going to have on our schools? How many students does a particular development proposal generate? And overall, what are the capacity levels for our school system? And you can see here that the core area does not have any schools in it per se, but it's served by Fairfax High School, Katherine Johnson Middle, Eagle View Elementary, which is just outside the core area, and then Greenbrier East Elementary. These numbers here are provided by our public schools planners, and you can kind of see what the projected membership and capacity is in both, for the school year. Last school year was 2022-23 is when they have data for, but then the projected would be, we have Katherine Johnson approaching capacity at 100% by, say, school year 2028, 2027-28, and then we have Fairfax High and others approaching a kind of that limit, but then Eagle View has some capacity as well as Greenbrier East, and so we'll be working very closely with our schools planners once we start to look at development proposals and the potential impact that these might have, because clearly we are looking at some I hesitate to call it a concern yet because we want to look at this within the totality of not only what's generated but also how it can be mitigated within the school system. And so we will be working very closely with our schools planners as we start to look at these numbers and how they're impacted by future development. And last but not least, and of course I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to open this up to questions. But one of the kind of more striking features with the core area is that we don't have any public parks or public recreational amenities provided by the park authority within the core area, but we do have the government center. The government center is primarily with that open space. It's primarily passive in nature, and so it's a great place to go for a walk or go for taking your dog out for a run or something along those. But we really don't have the types of public recreational amenities in the immediate area, such as for example, a rec center, playground, ball field. These kind of more active amenities. So if you're living in the core area, you typically have to travel some distance to be able to take advantage of those amenities within the community. And so kind of part of that conversation will be when we start looking at if it's going to be like a residential increase, for example, what impact that's going to have on the overall service levels for our existing facilities, as well as are there any opportunities to provide any more of those active amenities as the population grows? How can we accommodate those opportunities close to home? All right, and with that, I've stopped sharing my screen. I'm going to open it up again. I know it's been a lot of information. If you haven't already seen that existing conditions report and you'd like to view that in more detail, I'd encourage you to please go on the website, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that as they come up. Are there any questions right now from the task force? I'll check here in the chat. We've got... Hi, Sabrina. I see you've raised your hand. How can I help you?
Hi there. So I am from the Braddock District. I live and own a business within the core area. And when I was reading through the report, what really struck me was the close to 80% renters. Is that typical for areas like that? Because if it's not, that's something that I'd like to flag.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's typical, because each of our suburban centers has its own kind of unique character to it, and so it can be a little bit hard to make apples to apples comparisons across the county. But that is something that as staff and as we start looking at the demographics, that's something that jumped out to me as well, was just the high percentage of people who are renting within the community. That could be interpreted several ways. I think most immediately we look at issues of housing affordability and things of that, but also just in terms of our study going forward, how is it that we involve people who are renting their homes more fully in the public process of these types of studies. Not only can renters sometimes be difficult to reach because you would have to go through their landlords in order to make that engagement, but also with the transient nature of people who rent typically, there may be less of an incentive to become involved in more of these long range planning studies where there's not really a direct perceivable benefit to them as renters within the area when we're looking at solutions that could be 5 years off. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge and something that we're definitely looking at in terms of all of that, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that shapes this particular study. It is something that I think is fairly unique within the county.
Sure, and I just wanted, I just wanted to add, because we are thinking about adding housing and things like that. It would be nice to put in consideration more opportunities for home ownership, maybe affordable condos and things of that sort, just because that was just a stark difference there. And then, as you mentioned, I think green spaces and things like that are very important. I also noticed when I was reading through everything, I really appreciated like the green buildings and the fact that that it said there was like language in there saying that with expansion and renovations of existing structures, we should like incorporate green building features to a significant extent. and then also encouraging existing buildings to incorporate these things. I also just wanted to flag adding more native plants, especially trees and shrubs, because that's really important to like the watershed, and we're trying to encourage all that stuff that's good for the environment and good for our water quality.
No, absolutely, and all of that is extremely important. I would also, just for those who have not had an opportunity yet to look at the comprehensive plan's overall area-wide guidance for the Fairfax Center area that was developed a few years ago, it does get into some detail about environmental protection and green building and green spaces and kind of the overall character of how that should look within the suburban center as a whole. And so when we're looking at the core area, that's kind of our place to start. Like, we have this broader guidance, but if we need to, how can we incorporate that broad guidance and make it more specific and more applicable to the core area? So definitely, that's been on our radar for a number of years. And now it's as we start to develop more refined planning, how do we take that into account? So now that's a very good observation. I see, Mary, you've had your hand up.
Thanks, Ryan. I also wanted to mention, Sabrina, I really love your comments, but I also wanted to highlight, if you look at a Google map of Fairfax County, and Fairfax Center is right sort of in the middle, the core area is right in the middle, and the headwaters of 4 different watersheds. And if you go one direction, down Difficult Run watershed, you end up in the Potomac River in Great Falls. And if you go the other direction, you end up down to the Potomac River the other direction. So, and there's green corridor all the way until you get to this Fairfax Center area and the mall in particular. And so even though there's a lot of green space around the government center, the mall and its redevelopment offers an opportunity to restore habitat, not just a tree here or there, but actual habitat to link all of that together. And right now, between 66 and the mall, there's, it's and Route 50 and 29. It's there's an opportunity there, I would say, for the future. So it's not just about protecting what's there, which is important, but also trying to make it better from going from all these surface parking lots. That was one comment. The other is about, and it's sort of related, but the character of transportation as opposed to just the traffic count numbers and how long you're in traffic, which is important. And I appreciate the biking and the comfort level of walking, but it's also the streetscape and how you feel when you're walking around, not just a comfort level from a safety perspective, but what the place looks like. And Fairfax, the center area, Fairfax Center has a lot of tree buffers, and we've seen with development, some of them be cut down, and it really changes the character of the area, and not in a good way. I don't agree with that. So I think we should, talk about the character of the transportation system, which is the road network as well. I think that's important to community and placemaking, and what might draw people to want to continue to live here or to be drawn to the area without stripping it all out.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. That's a great point. Thank you. Let's see. Do we have any other members of the task force that have questions? If not, we'll go ahead and open it up for some public comments, either in the chat or if someone wants to, speak or otherwise. But let's any task force members. Yes, Mr. Sargent.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Just a couple of questions. Have your consultants provided any population ceilings that they'd recommend so far, or any estimates of what population could result out of this redesign?
Not quite yet, only because we're not yet to the point of looking at future conditions. We've looked solely at the existing conditions. To some extent, we've already looked at, when I say existing conditions, I looking at what's already been planned for and what's already been accounted for in our kind of regional growth models and things like that. But that's certainly going to be something as we start looking at growth scenarios. What that's going to do to population numbers, and of course impacts on public services and things like that. So we're just not yet to the point in the study where we're looking at those future conditions yet.
I think it'd be helpful too if they provide some sense from previous experience elsewhere, if there's some apples to apples comparison of what changing from a transit area to a more stable population area does or does not accomplish for a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
That's a great point. Thank you.
We appreciate that, Tim. And one thing I would note is we are hoping probably at the next task force meeting to set out, and Ryan covered this in his presentation, but set out a maximum density scenario to test for transportation purposes, not to be the thing that is like the be all end all for what we ultimately would see in the comp plan, but to be able to begin the impact analysis. So that would have some assumptions about population projections. We have that, I think 20% by 2045 that Ryan showed in terms of what's currently, thought of as being the demographic future for the area. That has a lot of assumptions into it, but one of those is the comprehensive plan potential. It's not the only thing, but it's one of them. But if we change that, there might be a new demographic future. So we'll talk about that pretty soon in terms of what we're going to start testing just for for the scenarios.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else that has any questions or anything that we can answer for you? I know it is coming up here on 8:30. I know that we had initially set aside 2 hours for this, and so we do have some time, although I do recognize that it is getting late for some of you, and so if there is a need to go ahead and drop off, please feel free to do that. Don't feel like you're holding anyone up, but we'll stay on here as long as we need to answer as many questions as we can.
Brian, we did get one question from Brian Clifford. Hi, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
About the process or strategy for engaging with landowners in the core area.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, that's a great question. And one of the things that we were hoping to do basically following this kickoff meeting is exactly that. We've started to hear from some of the from representatives of some of the commercial properties in the core area. About what they would, how they would want to engage in this. We would like to have, in advance of the next task force meeting, a good sense of what the property owners in the area have in terms of their kind of aspirations for the next 20 years or so. So do expect that we will, if you know of a property owner that is interested in participating, we'd love to hear from them. We'll also be reaching out to the commercial property owners as well. So great question, but we're hoping to do that basically immediately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I guess to follow on to that, Mary, with your question, you've asked, is there a plan to survey them? Example, remote workers and vacancies. Yes, that will be part of our discussion as we talk with them, kind of better understanding what their plans are for the future and how they might, what their needs would be for property development going forward. Certainly, we need to, better understand that from a planning perspective, and there's really no one better to help us understand that than the property owners and the businesses here in the core. So yes, that's going to be one of the things that we are going to be having that discussion about. So Mustafa has asked, are you going to plan any road diets in the area to make the streets safer? That's a great question. I'm going to ask Tom, do you have any insight on that? I know that our transportation study is ongoing, but I didn't know if you'd have anything to share at this point.
Well, I'm sure you've all noticed that quite a few of the roadways in the Fairfax Center area, especially around Government Center, have already been road dieted. Government Center Parkway, Post Forest, at least those are two that are coming to mind. So we've already taken the initiative to reduce the 4-lane cross sections down to 2 with much nicer bicycle facilities. And to be honest, when we entered this effort, we were hoping that we would be able to develop some similar recommendations for some of the other roads. So I would definitely say road diets are a potential solution for some of the roadways. But until we know what the land use that we're testing, when you move forward with DPD and develop a preferred land use scenario, we'll test it. And then, like Commissioner Cortina said, we're not focused solely on roadways, but we do want to at least make sure that everything's balanced. So I guess to answer the question, road diets are definitely going to be potentially part of the solution, yes.
Great, thanks, Tom. And that's a great question again, Mustafa. So I really appreciate that insight in your interest in that. So certainly. All right, do we have anyone else here on the line or wishing to comments, questions, anything at all? I know that we covered a lot of information tonight, and I know that it's a lot to absorb. And so, if you don't have questions right now, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to keep engaged with us on this process. Just thinking ahead, and I'll continue to stay online in case anybody has questions. But if you start reading through the documentation, if you start like going through that existing conditions report, and you have questions or anything like that, of course, I'm always available. Any of our staff are always available to answer questions. And so, please feel free to reach out. Feel free to ask those questions, and we will do our best to get answers to those for you. And of course, we'll have more information coming forward, as we continue to work on government center visioning and continue to work on that process with the consultant. In future task force meetings, we'll have some updates on, the status of how things are going on the community engagement side of things and kind of what we've heard from the community. And then Graham here has posted in the chat, for those wanting to engage one-on-one with us, we have our email addresses, Ryan Stewart and Graham Owen, here in the chat, and so that's available as well. Phone calls, chats, or emails are all welcome avenues of communication. So, in terms of next steps, we talked about bringing the task force together about quarterly or so. Of course, Graham did mention our desire to kind of hit the ground running, so to speak. And so, we'll be scheduling our next meeting here within the next few weeks or so, maybe next month or so, to start looking at the vision of the area, kind of really finish up the baseline and the existing conditions analysis, and really start working our way forward. And so, the sooner we can start getting those development scenarios underway is really when I think a lot of the excitement of this study is going to start, is that we start really looking at the possibilities for the core area and how it's going to fit into the overall suburban center. So it's something I'm very excited about, and I hope everyone's excited for this too. I think that we're not given these types of opportunities very often, but when they are, they can really have an impact, a positive impact for the future. And so, for everybody involved, I just think it's a great opportunity that we don't get very often. So that's what excites me about it. But so we've got all right. Well, if there are any other questions or comments or anything like that, I'm happy to answer any of them from you. If not, I think now would be a good time for us, it being 8:30, that we can go ahead and say thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. Again, task force members, I know that your time and your is very valuable, and I genuinely appreciate your willingness to volunteer for this. I mean, we really could not have this be a successful study without you. And so I very much look forward to relying on your expertise and your local knowledge of the area as we move forward. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan and Graham and Tom and all of the people who came out from the community and the supervisor's office. And I really hope that and the community members, that we'll all have an opportunity to weigh in as we go forward.
I second Mary's comments. Thank you to the county staff and to all of those who volunteered.
All right, thank you all very much.
Is that it?
I think that's it. That's all we got.
right.
We'll get to work.
I will just continue to stay here in case there's anything left over. Just as a reminder, for those of you still on the call, we do have a recording going on, and if there's anyone that you feel may be interested in this information that couldn't be here tonight, we'll have that information posted on the website, and they can review it. And of course, if there's any follow-up that we need to do as the staff team, please let us know, and we'll get those answers for you. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Y'all have a good night.
Take care.
Ryan, will your presentation also be posted?
Oh, yes, it will. Yeah, I'll have that as well. Yeah, I'll put that up as a PDF.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
See you guys.
Okay. Thanks again. I appreciate you standing in tonight. So it's really helpful.
Glad to do it. Glad to do it.
All right. Have a good night.